The background for what I'm going to share is my own personal testimony where I truly believed that Christianity was a farce. I did not believe it was true. And as a student in the university, I set out to make a joke of Christianity, to explain away the historical reliability of the Bible, and to make a joke of the resurrection. But in my investigation, I came to the conclusion that I could hold the Bible, the Old and New Testament, in my hand and say it is historically accurate and it is historically reliable. The second conclusion I came to was that the resurrection of Jesus Christ, as much as I did not want to believe it, was an historical fact. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul wrote this: "But if there is no resurrection of the dead, not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is vain. Your faith also is vain." Everything that Jesus taught, lived, and died for depended upon one thing: his resurrection. The resurrection of Jesus Christ was not some supra-historical spiritual event. There was time and there was space. It was the third day. It was the 6th hour. If you'd been at the tomb of Christ and had a watch, it would have been ticking off the time. It was time as we know it today, and it was space as we know it today in history. There was a literal physical stone, seal, tomb. There were people as we know it today. And the reason I emphasize that, a lot of people like to say, well, Christ's resurrection was not historical. It was something spiritual from another world. No, it happened in history as we know it today. When I set out to refute Christianity, one of the first things I did was look at the people who were expertise, or they had a lot of expertise in their area of research, and how they set out to refute Christianity and ended up becoming a Christian. For example, Thomas Arnold. For 14 years, he was the headmaster of the famous rugby school in England. He wrote the 3 great volumes on the history of Rome. And this was his conclusion as an expert in history when it came to the resurrection. "And I know of no one fact in the history of mankind which is proved by better and fuller evidence of every sort to the understanding of a fair inquirer than the great sign which God hath given us, that Christ died and rose again from the dead." And then Brooks Foss Westcott. Dr. Westcott made this observation: "Taking all the evidence together, it is not too much to say that there is no historic incident better or more variously supported than the resurrection of Christ. Nothing but the antecedent assumption that it must be false could have suggested the idea of deficiency in the proof of it." Dr. Simon Greenleaf, in my country, is probably one of the greatest legal minds in the history of America. He was a skeptic, not a believer. And he used to mock and put down the Christians in his law classes at Harvard. Well, one year, some Christians in a law class got tired of it. So they challenged Greenleaf to take his 3 volumes on the laws of legal evidence and to apply his expertise in these principles to the evidence for the resurrection of Christ. Now that wasn't a bad challenge. After much persuasion, he had to accept it or lose all of his integrity. And so he started to apply his principles of evaluating evidence to the resurrection. In the process, he became a believer. And this great legal mind concluded that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is one of the best established facts of history. Now listen, according to the laws of legal evidence administered in the courts of justice. What did these men find? What caused them to so change their thinking and to eventually become a believer? The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the crux of the Christian faith. And as Paul said as we read, if Christ be not raised from the dead, then your faith is in vain. And I want to state it again. Everything that Jesus Christ taught, lived, and died for depended upon his resurrection. That's why I tried so hard to refute it, but I couldn't.